Good evening. Hello. Anybody out there? Good evening. Hello, hello. I feel like I'm way back here, so I know how Scott's going to feel when he gets up here, too. My name is Deb Sherrick. I direct the Career Center, and I'm so excited to see you all here. So number one, thank you for coming. I think we owe it to the rain, although I think most of us would be really glad if it stopped tomorrow. But thank you for coming. If it was sunshine out, I know I'd be out there with like a big hook trying to pull you guys in. So thank you for being here. I'm really looking forward to this evening, and we are really blessed to have some amazing people here on campus with us. We have 4 wonderful U of O alumni and an honored guest from USC. So you always have to have one in the crowd. This has been the brainchild of a single person in this room. Sean, are you here? Come on up for a sec. I just want to tell you how this all came about. Sean Landry, who's making his way up to the front of the room, which is where he should be, is in his 3rd year as a GTF with the Career Center. And last year, he came and proposed this idea to bring people who are doing really interesting work to campus, focused on the College of Arts and Science primarily just because we really wanted to show you that people with degrees from the College of Arts and Science go out and do amazing things in their careers. So Sean had this great idea and basically spent last year trying to convince us that it was a great idea. And we basically gave him the ball this year and let him run with it. So with the help of some wonderful partners, the U of O Library, who obviously has provided this great space. You see some taping going on. We're all going to be on television on Monday or Tuesday or maybe next Wednesday. The wonderful snacks and things in the back of the room. The library has been terrific and frankly helped us to bring the Dean of the College of Arts and Science here for a brief keynote address before we start with the panelists. So we're grateful for Scott, but we're particularly grateful for Barbara and all of her work. We also had received a grant from US Bank, which underwrote some of the expenses of the program, so mostly marketing dollars, but we're very grateful to US Bank for that gift. And finally, the UO Alumni Association. And I know there's several reps that are here. There's some materials that they have to give you at the end. We're all in this together. We all want you to be successful. The Career Center, the College of Arts and Science, the UO Libraries, and certainly the Alumni Association. So I really wanted to, I want everyone to give Scott a, I'm so sorry. He's sitting right there. I keep looking at his head. I want everyone to give Sean a big round of applause. He's done a really great job with this. So it is a privilege of the Career Center to sort of host this event this evening with our partners. We're really glad you're all here. And without further ado, I want to bring up our first speaker, who is the Dean of the College of Arts and Science. I had the privilege of meeting Scott Coltrane, I think a week after he arrived last year. And just on the basis of a brief conversation, in essence saying goodbye to another senior administrator on this campus, I had just such a great feeling about the leadership coming in for the College of Arts and Science. He is a noted scholar. He does a lot of things really right from a scholarly perspective, but what I was so struck with was his interest and concern in his students and the future of his students and figuring out ways that we could be more pronounced in helping College of Arts and Science students recognize their potential and go all the way. So I'm very privileged to introduce you, for those of you who have not met him, to Scott Coltrane.
Okay. Well, welcome. I'm glad to see such a great turnout, and I am honored to be here to be able to moderate this great panel, and it's my pleasure to get to know them a little bit and meet them for the first time, and you will all have the pleasure of doing that as well. But I've been called on to first set up the context in which we want to think about what it means to get a job in today's market, in today's economic situation. And as a new dean of the college, I've spent the year going out to all the different departments and programs and learning about what all of them do. I'm, of course, familiar with the basic disciplines, but the College of Arts and Sciences has many different units. And so I've been able to appreciate everything that's going on campus. But my task today is to link that to what's going on in the world. So I have just a few slides that set the tone for where we are today and where you are in it and where the U of O and colleges in general, what we're facing in terms of moving on to the next generation. Certainly we're in times of unprecedented social change. China will produce 3.3 million college graduates this year, and India 3.1, all English speaking, by the way, as compared to the US that'll produce 1.3. And I raise these figures not to say we're behind or we're outnumbered, although we are, but just to show the global context of what the world that you are entering is quite different than even a decade ago, but certainly than several decades ago. Demographic change in the state of Oregon and throughout the US and around the world, much more diversity. 28% of Oregon high school graduates will be from Hispanic families in just 2021. And to accompany this, an information explosion. A quote here about the Oxford English Dictionary adding 2,500 words. But I think the technological change that I'm living through, that you all grew up with in a way much more immediately, has really transformed the world, has transformed what we mean and think about knowledge. Google, for instance, founded in 1998, had 2 years later 6 billion web pages indexed. And then within 8 years, 1 trillion web pages. That's huge exponential growth. What has that done to what it is that employers look for? How's the world changed in terms of how we think about businesses and markets? Here's a quote from Intel CEO Craig Barnett talking about the turnover in the number of products that are marketed. 80 to 90% of the revenue. And this is a unique company in that it's very much cutting edge and having to stay ahead, but it's true of most industries. The pace of change is huge. The number of different jobs people can expect are growing exponentially. This quote from the US Department of Labor about someone, this is 20 years from their 18th birthday, that's why they picked the age 38, would expect to have 10 to 14 jobs. I've seen some tables that break it down even more, and at the beginning, at the turn of the century, in the late 90s, going into the year 2000, it was closer to 10, and we're projecting it'll be closer to 15 at the end of another couple of years. So it really is true that today's employees can't count on the stability of labor markets and jobs the way they used to. And many jobs that didn't exist just a few years ago are now existing. So I've listed just a few here, some of them a bit older than others, but others that are just really cutting edge. Things like social networking software, you know, it did not exist 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, the jobs weren't there. So we have a rapidly changing social situation and cultural situation. And I think the former Secretary of Education, Richard Riley, said it well. We are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented, in order to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. So that's a fairly insurmountable problem. So what are you doing here in college? What are we doing to train you for the unknown? Today, I think we want to focus on the fact that the sort of liberal arts education that places like U of O are very good at are not unrelated to the real world. They're not at all unrelated to what employers want. There's a quote from Steve Forbes about the source of wealth and capital in this new era is the human mind, the human spirit. And I think that's really the key. So how did you get here? And some of these slides now are taken for an audience that's different. So I would appreciate feedback maybe afterwards. Come up and tell me these are things more intended for donors or sort of public audiences in the community that maybe are less familiar with what a liberal arts education is. But the UO mission statement has these goals, helping the individual learn to question critically, think logically, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically. So that's a deep list, and it's exactly the things that employers are asking for. I've been reading surveys. The National Associations for Colleges and Universities have conducted surveys just in the last 2 years of employers, and they say repeatedly that they don't want people trained for a narrow technical discipline. They want people who can think on their feet. And so part of what we do in terms of liberal arts education stems from the root word liber, or for liberty, and it means to educate. It means to liberate, excuse me, and it is about freedom. So there's a way in which being able to study different topics from different vantage points really allows you to solve problems in ways that make you a better employee for those potential employers. So whether it's business or medical school or law school, oftentimes the folks that are interested in graduates of college these days are interested because they're broadly trained. They're trained across disciplines. They're trained in a variety of techniques as well as general knowledge. So the ability to do analysis, to solve problems, to communicate, to compute, and to synthesize knowledge are more important than any of the facts that you learn in a particular class. So what has composed a liberal arts education has really changed quite drastically from the founding of the U of O in 1876 till now. The content is different. I mean, there were certain required courses. There was much less choice. There was much less individual choice. And so as we move into the 21st century, the choice that you have made, choosing from among very many different specialties on campus, hopefully will serve you well in that you're able to take knowledge in one field and make connections to knowledge in another field. And that's particularly important because we don't know what the shape of knowledge will be. Those earlier slides about Google or the Oxford Dictionary changing so fast, it's really about the nimbleness to ask the right questions. And then some of the tools to solve them, but sort of the eagerness and the willingness and the creativeness to solve them is very important to employers. So my one piece of advice is not to sell yourself short, to talk about the things that inspire you when you're out there doing job interviews or writing those cover letters, because it's your heart as well as your mind and your kind of initiative and your ability to tackle the difficult questions that employers are really enamored with. They don't want narrow, technically trained people. Technique is good, but when the techniques are changing so fast, it's really about you envisioning what you can do for that company or that agency or that association. Couple other things. So we're calling this liberal arts redux to redefine, and really the point that I've been making is it's not an either or. There used to be a big divide between practical and professional education on the one hand and theoretical or more abstract education on the other hand. Well, today they kind of go together in ways that I think that are novel and never before seen, in part because what it means to understand change in the world is more difficult, and that pace of change is increasing. Here's a quote I love from Alvin Toffler, who's a futurist, talking about the important thing is to cultivate the individual's capacity to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's something about the quality of a liberal arts education that allows you to do that. So here's some slides about the complexity of the college. Now, this does not mean in any way to demean the smaller slices of the pie here, the professional schools and the other units on campus. I think this is a place that really thrives on liberal arts education, so even journalism majors and business majors and architecture majors are really, they embed a lot of the general education in the liberal arts, and it's important to be trained across many fields. So one of the things that I think is very important is to look at the complexity of linkages. You might take one topic and study it 12 different ways, and you can do that through different disciplines. And then as you're out in the job world, to apply that knowledge in ways that is so much more practical to solve a problem in certain kinds of ways. So what we've been engaged in the College of Arts and Sciences is to poll our faculty, poll our alumni, so none of you got them because you haven't quite graduated, or a few of you may have. But what we did is we sent out emails to about 30,000 College of Arts and Sciences graduates, and we're getting back fantastic stories. We've gotten back now a couple of thousand fantastic stories. And many of the stories are about how they did something interesting when they were here, but they did not envision the place where they would end up. And oftentimes, just as for you all, many of you probably have changed majors a few times. Many of these folks are telling us stories about the number of times that they changed jobs, that they changed careers, and how something about the value of their education served them well, to opening their mind to envision something, the creativity or the trust, the sort of things that build self-esteem on an intellectual and practical level. That's what you get out of a good liberal arts education. So I don't want to focus on these folks because we have before you even more amazing stories. And so just suffice it to say there's lots of people who started out on one path and ended up getting jobs elsewhere and ended up being enormously successful. But oftentimes some of those that were the most successful were failures at a couple of things before then. So the other thing is that the nimbleness that we hope that we've somehow helped you with, also hopefully we've given you the fortitude and the stick-to-itiveness to suffer some failures in the face of a changing world that doesn't always value what's important, but to have the creativity to create your own jobs is really amazing. And so with that, Deb will introduce some of our creative graduates, including from SC.
Because this is being taped, I have to make sure that I speak into the microphone. So everybody got one of these on their chair, I hope. And there are bios on the back, so I don't think the panelists necessarily need to run through their entire career ladder so far. But I am going to ask each panelist to talk a moment about what they're currently doing, and particularly ask one question on this first go-round, which is, what has been the value of your liberal arts degree as you've moved through your education, or moved through your career so far? Ian, you're doing exactly what most panelists won't do, and that's making eye contact with someone who's moderating. So you get to be first.
Oops. Let that be a lesson to you, future job seekers. I work for the Portland Trailblazers, and I organize basketball camps for kids. And it's a great opportunity. The team is doing fairly well right now. Okay, we're doing really, really well. And it's great to be able to use our name to inspire kids to do good things. Everything we do, we try to reflect what the message that Coach McMillan has, what the players do, and it's a great time to be involved with the organization. I've been there almost 2 years, and I take full responsibility for our turnaround. And I'll be happy to address those questions later.
Can you talk a little bit about your, are you English background? English degree?
I was an English major.
So how's that paid some dividends for you along the way?
Well, I got to write a lot, and I got to read a lot, and I still like to do both those things. And I think it taught me to read critically, write critically, and think of different ways to resolve problems.
Thank you. Karmen?
That's fine. So I'm Karmen Fore. I work for Congressman DeFazio, and how my liberal arts education helped me, well, I was a political science major, so I think working for Congress, I sort of have the one-to-one educational job relationship, but oftentimes you find most political science majors don't end up working in politics. But I think one of the things that I very much valued from my education at the University of Oregon, and particularly in the political science department, was the critical thinking challenges that were, provided to me, the amount of reading I had to undertake, the amount of writing I had to do, how I had to develop my own ideas, stand on my own 2 feet, argue my own issue, both in writing and standing up and speaking before a very large group, and defending my own position from my own thoughts. That's definitely a big part of what I do now, because pretty much the stock and trade in my business is your word and your ideas, and that's really it. At the end of the day, in Congress and in politics, we stand behind what we say, will we follow up with our word, and do our ideas and concepts have merit, and do they connect to the real world in some way? So I really valued that, but I also appreciated that the student body were a very real and representative group of people, and a very diverse group of people from all over the world, which also I think had a good value to my work experience now.
Thank you. Bill?
Well, following that very direct line of political science major, works in political science, my route is a little more circuitous. I write these hiking guidebooks. I don't know if you've seen them, but I write hiking guidebooks, and also 2 novels and 2 adventure memoirs and books about Oregon history and stuff. I always knew I wanted to be a writer because my father was the editor of the Salem newspaper. But I didn't want to go into newspaper journalism because that was hard work. 9-to-5 job and 2 weeks vacation. Everybody in that office was under deadlines and stressed out. A lot of them smoked and drank and had ulcers. I'm not into that. So I studied to be a writer. So I studied creative writing at Cornell and graduated and found out there are no jobs for novelists. So I painted houses and welded bicycle trailers and worked in a bookstore and did some highway maintenance. Then wound up here in Eugene and went door to door with a suit. I wore a suit and went door to door downtown from one business to the next. There were no jobs. This was a recession back then too. And just said, I know you're not advertising a job. Do you have a position? And so I didn't get a job as an insurance secretary or as a piano salesman, but a bank said, well, we need a vault teller. And so for 9 months, I worked in the basement of the bank counting money. Meant no contact with people. I had time to teach myself to read French and Danish down there in the vault, and decided after that 9 months that I needed more education. Couldn't get a job really, so I go back to school. A lot of people are doing that right now. So I had no money, and it costs money to go to school in America, but not in Europe. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I went to Germany, and we went to school at the University of Heidelberg there for a year and a half. And it's true, university is free in Europe, but the credits only transfer back to the US if you pay US tuition, which meant no good. But I did get a job, a position at the U of O graduate school in German, and a GTF position was attached to that. So it paid tuition, a little bit of money, and I figured this time I'll aim for a real job. So I studied to be a German teacher in high school, got my high school certificate, and that was fine. My wife and I both got jobs in a little town outside of Portland. But the week before school started, the previous German teacher, who had had a maternity leave for the year, had a miscarriage and wanted her job back. And so they reassigned me to teach high school English. It was 6 classes of freshman English. This was a nightmare. I mean, I like English. I like this, but the kids did not. They were really interested in anything else. After 9 months of that, I was ready to do anything else on the planet than to teach high school English. And my wife said, why don't you do what you want to do? Why don't you do what you love? Why don't you write? And I said, I can't do that. We don't have any money. She said, I will support you for 7 years. For 7 years, I will teach school. And if you haven't made a living as a freelance writer after 7 years, then you have to get a job clerking at Kmart. That was a serious deal. And so I started writing articles for magazines, Mother Earth News, Handyman. But you don't make much with that. I wrote a novel. 50 publishers turned it down. At the bottom of the 7th year, I decided I would hike 1,000 miles across Oregon to visit all the wilderness areas I could find. They just made this new wilderness bill, and somebody needed to write a guidebook about it. So I had no money to do the research by driving to them, so I just walked from the westernmost point of Oregon to the easternmost point and took notes. And along the way, I also kept a journal of my adventures. And that was published by a New York publisher for a $25,000 advance, which was more money than I had earned in my life cumulatively up to that point. And suddenly then I was the hiker guy, and I realized, well, I better start writing hiking books. So I did, but, and they pay the bills. But I've also then been able to write several novels. I've got some more in the works, and all kinds of other books. So it's been a circuitous route, and it took really the faith of my wife to support me for 7 years. That's my roundabout route, but I did get where I wanted to go.
That's awesome. That's great. Chris.
Well, yeah, I guess for me, the journey that I've taken, starting from the moment that I got to University of Oregon, is about as abstract as a College of Arts and Sciences degree would allow, because I didn't actually know what degree I was getting until I walked into the dean's office in my 5th year of college and said, "So, can I graduate?" And they said, "Well, it looks like you kind of have a political science degree." So, but I definitely didn't have a 1-to-1 ratio like Karmen did. Although, interestingly enough, when I got to school, Karmen was actually the vice president of the student body. And my the first thing I really did on campus was, started working at the ASUO. And I didn't even know how I ended up there, except that her running mate, Bobby, was drunk or something, and it looked like they were having a lot of fun. So I felt like, I love college. But, I really, but I think my path really spoke well of what a university actually provides, because I'm the worst student. I mean, I was a C's get degrees kind of guy, not by design. I'm just so dyslexic, it's ridiculous. So I managed to just, I love the path of education, but it was always difficult for me. And I think that's why I picked the classes in such a random way, because I had to pick things I could pass. And so it started down a road of philosophy, and then I went to political science, and then I was a business marketing major for a minute, and then I kind of went back and forth. But the thing that actually inspired me most about school was that there was so much to do here with my energy. So, and I think that's the part that was most beneficial for me being here, outside of the fact that I did actually get a great education. It wasn't just an education of books. It was an education of utilizing the resources around you to get what you need. And so, I started a fraternity because the drinking rules were so strict on campus that I started my own fraternity, and we ended up having it at my house. And amazingly enough, the fraternity has now grown into the largest fraternity on campus, which is shocking to me. And they actually took over the house of our big rival fraternity, which is no longer on campus. So I've got to see that one. I worked at a bar. I wrote for, I don't know if the Commentator's still around, but is it? Yep. I was the liberal guy writing for the Commentator. My whole thing was that I always write naked, and and at the same time, I was doing campus radio and blah blah blah. But the thing was, for me, I knew I was never going to be able to get a regular job, because I could never do the 9-to-5 thing, and you could. And so but I knew I needed to do something. So being on campus for me was just the most mind-opening experience, because the school has such a sense of activism and a sense of opportunities for students to actually do something. So inside the classroom and outside the classroom, to me, were like the most synergistic thing. And since I've graduated from college, I've started 4 companies in 4 completely different fields, and they were all relatively successful. But like my personality, once I get to a certain level with things, I got to go to the next thing. And I think that the College of Arts and Sciences education process actually supported that, because I had, it was all critical thinking. It was all looking and saying, okay, do I have the confidence to actually decide I want to do something else, and can I actually back it up with action? And I think by having a liberal arts degree, you get that, because it is absolutely 100% a process of critical thinking and problem solving, and that's really what life, that's the success in life, and believing in yourself that you could actually do something. Because I think every single person that succeeds in life, more often than not, has a crazy story about how they got there. And my journey started when I was 12 years old, really. My father, I was obsessed with electronics, and my father took me to this trade show, and they had video games there. And I walked in to play some games, because of course, what kid wouldn't want to do that? And this guy asked me what I think of the game, and I said, it was the worst game I've ever played in my entire life. And he's like, do tell. So I gave him sort of this riot act about how, kids, they're not making games for kids anymore, or whatever. He gave me his card. He said, well, thanks for your honesty. And I said, well, my friend, I have a business. I test video games. And he said, oh, yes? And how much do you charge? I said, $100, which at the time seemed like $1 million. So he said, well, give me a call. And so I went around this thing, and by the end of the day, I had about 20 cards, and I was charging $175. And suddenly, I was a 13-year-old in the video game business, and these random companies that had no idea who I was and how completely unqualified I was to evaluate their products were actually sending me, machines and whatever. So all throughout high school, I was the most popular nerd around because I had the games before anybody else did, and I never really had to have a real job like my friends did. But at that point, I realized that nothing seems too absurd, right? I mean, it's like if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And so that's always been my philosophy throughout life. And sometimes you get knocked down, and you just have to get right back up. But I think what won me over more than anything about my liberal arts education was that it actually supports that concept. And it really is up to you to decide to liberate your mind and utilize it, because the books aren't the answer, right? It's what you get out of the books and then what you do with it. And I think it's not just what you do in the classroom, but it's what you do outside the classroom that coincides with it. You have to give it a practical application, and you have to make it apply to something that you truly believe in. And I think that's probably the most important thing. Is I think a lot of people believe that they're supposed to do something, and that's not the approach. It's what you want to do, and then you make it happen. So I think that's probably why I've grown so fond of this school, because it totally allowed me to do that. And so my political science degree, as you can tell, has served me extremely well with all of my work in politics that I'm doing. But that being said, what I loved about my political science degree was the debate. It was like Karmen said, it was the process of acknowledging ideas and discussing ideas and thinking about ideas and fighting for your own ideas. And I think that's the key component to all this. So. I don't know what the hell I was supposed to talk about, but that was my rant for right now.
You did it.
Okay,
you
good.
did it. It is whatever you wanted it to be. How's that?
Yes, that's the summation.
Yeah. Pan.
And I take the opposite. I was asked a question, and I'm going to answer the question. U of O was actually my second school. I started at Lakehead University, which on the north shore of Lake Superior, in an outdoor recreation and geography program. And when I was up there, what I wanted to do for life was to wear the clothes that I have on, take a knife, and go out into the Ontario wilderness and survive. And I was confident that I could do that. But a degree would be helpful, just in case, and the outdoor aspects of Oregon and the recreation and the physical geography, that would be helpful as well. So actually, when I came down to U of O, I had no idea what I wanted to do as a career. But I look back, and when I get those phone calls from the Alumni Association saying join, or the donation questions join, which degree is it that really supported me through all the career changes? And my answer has to be they all did. But the U of O gave, the basics, as Scott was talking about, the flexibility, those basic skills, the writing, the reading, the critical thinking, those are so very important. And I'm a true believer, it really doesn't matter what degree you have, that things are going to change, but it's the process of getting a degree. And now, if you had asked me 24 years ago if I would ever be the director of a children's museum, I'd say no way in hell. There's just no way I would have done that. But the science degree added to the master's degree in education and science and outdoor teacher education. So I kind of kept that, that knife and clothing on the back. And then that went to the science center. And so I'm still in science, not geography, not physical geography, but still in science. And then that led to education, and then the public policy and the education piece. And so if you kind of take those degrees in education and in science and in management, with nonprofit organization specialization and shake those up, you do get the director of a children's museum. But the liberal arts provided that foundation to allow you to go somewhere else.
Thank you very much. One more question, then I'm going to turn it over to these guys, and I'll walk around with the microphone and hand it to you. What are some of the key decisions that you made early in your career that you, in retrospect, because you all now have a quilt of a career that you can look back at, that really affected sort of so where you are today? What were some of the risks that you took? What were some of the actions that you took? Who were the people that you sought out? Tell us a little bit about that, because you all know that this group is going out into a world much like 1981, when Bill was talking about probably hitting Eugene and finding out that everybody had the same degrees that he did. So what are some of the early decisions that you remember making that have been big influencers in where you are now? Who'd like to go first? Pam.
I think some of the early decisions are the aspects of personal sacrifice. I wouldn't recommend this, but I got married at the age of 19, and I'm actually still married to that person. But, but that took an awful lot of work, because I was in school here. It was the 80s again. My husband couldn't get a job. We're living on student loans. You know, we're living in Amazon housing at the time when it was truly Amazonian. And, you know, taking shoes out of the free box. We couldn't afford an ice cream cone. But going to school was the most important thing. You know, I started walking dog professionally as one of my jobs to help put me through school. My husband and I cleaned chickens and fed chickens, and he had a new degree in microbiology from the University of Michigan, and he's cleaning chicken poop. And then, you know, we moved out to Virginia so that he could go to school, and we lived a lot apart so that we both could pursue our educational interests. And then after we both graduated, you know, we'd live together and then live apart again, not because we have a poor relationship, but so that we could each pursue our careers and such. And we chose not to have children, but after 27 years of marriage, we just adopted an 11-year-old girl. And so we kind of made choices to make school and career the most important things in our lives. And so it's about personal sacrifice and not having things at the moment.
Next. Any good? Oh boy, here we go.
I think probably the best thing I ever did was not rush, because you know, when I left college, I didn't really know. I'd made video games for half my life, and it seemed like that would be the natural path. But I realized that I actually didn't love making video games, and I loved technology, but I didn't really quite know how to manifest that. And so I moved into my parents' house and got a job working as an extra on TV shows and movies. And what was great about the job is it was a lot of sitting around doing nothing and getting paid. And just much like counting money in a bank, but it gave me enough, you know, money to go out and eat, you know, have a little bit of food and you know, have a little bit of a life. But I took the time to really think about what mattered to me and what really I wanted to do, because it was actually just at the start of the first internet explosion, and I wanted to be a part of that, and it took me about a year of toiling in some of the worst environments you'd ever imagine, like being dressed as a Klingon on a Star Trek set and not being allowed to take the mask off for 8 hours, and just all these things that in some ways felt so demeaning, but at the same time, like I knew that there was some path that I was supposed to take, you know. But even, you know, and then at one point I actually realized if I just told, like, especially on big sets, if you just told them you're a film student, they would kind of pretend like you weren't an extra and you just get paid to hang out. But the most important thing was, like, I had to know what the path was going to be, because what I saw with a lot of my friends was they were rushing to get jobs. And my roommate from college, who I loved to death, ended up getting a job selling insurance, and he hates it. He's like 10 years later, he's like, oh man, this sucks. I'm like, you know it does. But he rushed, you know, and now he's switching, he's having his like pre-midlife crisis career switch, but I'm glad he's doing it. I think that, you know, there's always this real intense vision of, like, you know, who are the 10 top employers in Oregon, and send out your letters to them, et cetera. But I think we live in a time now where small businesses and little ideas can turn into something great, because we do have, you know, the internet and a variety of things that can actually empower ideas. And I think it's at least worth taking a risk right at the beginning to see if you can do what your dream actually is, before you just go down this sort of, you know, typical path that a lot of people take. Because ultimately, most jobs that people start in the beginning aren't the ones that they really wanted. They just, you know, pull the break glass and get me a job button, and then they end up going, oh shit, I'm working in a cubicle, it sucks, you know. But so I think, you know, if I could give one piece of advice is, you know, think about it, start thinking about what you really want to do. What's your dream? I mean, he walked 1,000 miles across the wilderness and found his job, you know, and I think that's the classic story is like, you know, I just spent 1,000 hours in a Klingon mask and found my job, but either way, like it worked, you know. And since then, you know, I've had, you know, a number of really interesting careers that I have created for myself because I now understand how to do it, and I just think that there are ways to survive when you're leaving college to pay, you know, enough of your bills so that you can get by until you really figure out what you want. Or maybe if you know what you want, use the fact that you're in college now to get it started. Because that's the one thing I probably would have switched. Like I should have started my first business while I was still here because there's a lot of really smart people that want to do it together. And I say use this as your first stab at business development and don't wait until you're about to leave. Like start now and take one crack at it. And then if it doesn't work, well, you tried, but at least you don't regret not trying.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. See, the question was about a decision that was difficult and important. And for me, that would be telling my publisher to jump in a lake and publish myself. And this was really, really hard because after finally getting a publisher, you just feel like, I'm a dog, beat me, you know, and they do. They do. They let your book go out of print at Christmas. They put on a picture from North Carolina on the cover of it, and you're why? Oh, we liked it. And then they don't pay you. They give you just a tiny royalty. It's a percentage. So I was getting 70 cents a book for every book that sold for like $17. I'm getting 70 cents, and I think, well, I pencil this out. If I publish this book myself, I'll get $7 a book. Is that true? Would I really make 10 times more if I do this? But I have to leave the publisher and start my own company and do it all myself. I take the risk, have to pay like $15,000 to a printer to print the books, have a garage full of books, have to deal with getting them to bookstores, I'll take all the risk of having the book fail and have like 3 tons of recyclable paper in my garage instead of book. So that was the biggest risk, and it turned out it did pencil out. And I had self-publishing is a lot riskier, but it's a lot more exciting, and you have a lot more control. But taking that decision of leaving like the corporate mentality and striking off on your own, there's no tracks ahead of you, and there's lots of ways it can fail, but that's the way that you often make the big break.
Great, thanks. Karmen?
I think where maybe I'm at is at a different place than where I think my compatriots are at this table. I sort of feel at this point in my career and working in politics and, you know, kind of seemingly having a straight gig, I think for me it's been having, and you must understand, I say this, I'm a partisan. I mean, you got to know where I'm coming from here. But sticking with it for the last 8 years in particular was, you know, not an easy feat. And sticking with, I mean, the situation, and this is going to sound a little heavy, and I don't mean it to be, but, you know, reading newspapers and watching TV and discussing politics over a cocktail and all that kind of stuff is oftentimes that for folks. Cocktail conversations are things that create personal agitation. But for me, this is my day-to-day, every day, all day long, what I do, trying to affect change and make, you know, life for people in this country, hopefully in a very abstract way, life around the world a lot better, very particularly, you know, making good change in Oregon. And, you know, for all of us, and it almost goes without saying, but finding something you have passion in, even when you're a young person, is, you know, even if, regardless of how odd it is, go for it. And for me, it honestly was politics. I mean, I was the weird kid, like, keying in on what the crisis in the Middle East and what's happening in Central America and, you know, canvassing door to door for school bond levies. And not because I was a nerdy kid, it's just that that's where my heart was. So it was a very difficult time for me to kind of, you know, keep in what I was doing, because the stress and the pressure in politics sometimes are so great. Because when I step out the door and living in this community or working in the district I do, you know, almost half the people kind of think you're a jerk. You're not, but, you know, that people are kind of aggressive at you that you don't even know in public and really want to just, you know, and they're not intending to be mean, but the way that we've we've handled our public discourse in the last decade or so has been pretty paltry. And so what that is translated into is the way we treat people is pretty bad, pretty shabby, and we kind of have forgotten, hey, we're all, until I think a little bit more recently, we're kind of all in the ship together, and you know, we might disagree at times, but sometimes those disagreements really aren't all that's as important as how do we, you know, keep moving forward as a people. And I think folks, at least from my perspective, have keyed into that a little bit. So there were some serious dark days for me trying to stay just in my profession. On a personal note, my brother's an active duty Marine, and he just deployed to Afghanistan on May 1st. He's been in Iraq, you know, so kind of working on issues related to the war, working on issues directly for my boss, representing him formally, helping veterans who, you know, are Vietnam-era World War II vets who are dying, working with families who are in the Oregon National Guard, get, you know, the things that they need, you know, hearing from families who have Marines that don't even have flak jackets in their active duty, or, you know, I mean, and these are, you know, I mean, so I say this and I recognize it sounds a little heavy and serious, but sometimes at some point in your career, and even if it's your passion, you're going to get challenged, and it's going to be hard to want to stay in it. Even if it's as fun as doing video games, because sometimes the grind of the thing that you love the most can just suck so much of it out of you. And the challenge for you, if and when you get to that place, is to say, how much is it worth it to you? How much is it to your family? Because it does impact your family life and all things personal, to stay in that, and what is the longer range goal that you're trying to get to? And it wasn't just simply for me that, you know, we had an election and yay, my team won. It's just not that trite. But I will maybe share one personal moment. It actually was after the election in 2006. And that's when at least the Democrats took control back of the Congress. And Peter and I, we went to this restaurant, Cornucopia. I don't know if some of you know it, over at 17th and Lincoln. And we were meeting up with some friends. It was the Thursday after the election. And we sit down, we're kind of at a long table like this. And you know, when I'm with Peter and I'm in Eugene, I'm conspicuous. I'm not. He is. So people are kind of looking, and everyone's chatting away. And so we're with all our friends at this table, and it's kind of a political group, and we're just like, oh my God, I can't believe we finally won something. I mean, we won this election. It's like the country's waking up. And at our table, we start clapping. And I'm not kidding you. Out of the blue in the restaurant, the entire restaurant burst into applause. I mean, it was not like, I mean, it was this just emotional group, community, everyone just went mad, and it wasn't about Peter. It was more like, oh my God, it just changed. You know, you could just feel that it was change. And it was, the wave of joy was incredible, and it bought me that moment that I needed to stay in my job. And so we all kind of sat in this restaurant, and again, you know, you got to kind of have some pretty thick skin to be in politics and do it for a living. But we were all like, oh, you know, my God, this isn't okay. People are getting it. And about a half hour later, we go to leave the restaurant, and the same thing happened again. Peter gets up to leave. I get up to go with him. The entire place just burst into applause. And again, it wasn't about Peter. It was really about that joy that if we all kind of come together, and in my business, I rely on, you know, genuinely all of you to be engaged and care. That's what that moment represented to me. And then to kind of really experience all that happened in '08 was beyond extraordinary. Obviously, the issues right now are hugely significant. You know, the situation our country's in, the world we're leaving for you all to go into a job market, it's really rough, and I totally get that. But what I do know is there are people who actually give a damn, who want to make it a better place, who get that it's hard, and so what? Oh my God, it's hard. You know what? Work is hard, life is hard, jobs are hard. Doing the people's business is hard, but if I just want people in it who are easy, you know, get out of the way. We don't have time for you. You know, we've got good things to do, and roll up our sleeves, and damn it, those are the people I'm looking for. And at least now, and I don't care from what spectrum or wherever, but folks are in it because they give a rip. That's what I care about. So, like I say, right now I'm in a little different place because I'm sort of like rebuying my passion, my soul, and revesting my faith in the larger scheme of my profession and all of us as a people. So it's abstract on the one hand, but it's deeply personal on another.
Thank you for sharing. I think if we had more time, you'd have a round of applause right now. But Ian.
The decision, in looking back, when I was you, I was pretty confident that I was the smartest guy in the world, and that I could do anything, and that the world was about to open up to me and I was going to be wildly famous and hugely rich and surrounded by beautiful people. So one day I decided, I was just graduated from college and I was training for the Paralympics, and I was pretty sure that I was about to be discovered, and I was in Los Angeles and it was the sports mecca, and everything was about to crack open for me. And I remember getting the newspaper outside my door, and I opened it up, and hey, there's a story about the Paralympics. Well, nobody knows what the Paralympics are. Most people in this room may not know what the Paralympics are, and didn't know what the Paralympics were then, because this was in the 80s, probably before a lot of you were born. I hate all of you. That's my pettiness, though. Don't reflect poorly on the Trailblazers. We love you. So I opened up the LA Times, and I was an English major, and I read this story, and it was about some lady in some lady in Kentucky. And I'm from Indiana, so I had a natural bias against that lady anyway. And I was beyond frustrated, because here I was about to make this big splash, pardon the pun, in the swimming pool, and I wanted coverage of what I was doing because I was cool and I went to USC and blah, blah, blah. So I called the sports editor from the LA Times. Well, calling the sports editor from the LA Times from the outside, if you've never met him, is a fairly stupid thing to do, because getting through to the sports editor of the LA Times is impossible. I'm going to make this call. I'm going to take this big chance by making this call. I'm a brave man. And I know in my heart that he's not going to take my call. So I make the call. May I speak to the sports editor, please? And yes, this is Bill Dwyer, sports editor of the LA Times. And that's exactly what I did. And I said, you know, Mr. Dwyer, I'm a Paralympic athlete, and I live in California, and I just went to USC, and I'm a little bit offended that you would write a story about somebody or that your paper would run a story, not even written by a Times writer, about somebody, doesn't have to be me, but somebody, you wrote a story about somebody from Kentucky. Well, we're doing good things here. What about us? And he said, okay, hotshot, Mr. SC guy, go to the Paralympics, come back and write a story. Oh, I'm an English major from SC. I can do this. This is no problem. So I went and did my thing, and I came back and I wrote, in retrospect, what was the single worst thing I've ever written. And he was nice enough not to laugh at me, but he said, you're going to hear this a lot, rewrite. So the decision I made, sorry I had to tell that story, but the decision I made was to try, was a small gamble, because that guy's not going to answer my phone call. And then he did answer my phone call, and he called my bluff. And it turned out, and this was a hard lesson for me to learn, that I wasn't the smartest guy in the world, that my story may be compelling, but it was no more compelling than your story or your story or your story. But it was amazing that he gave me that chance. And in retrospect, it wasn't that big a chance, because if I fail and I'm a horrible writer, it goes in the circular file and I'm never heard from again. But then the cool thing was that it did go in the circular file, but he gave me another chance. So I did what any SC kid would do. I hired a better writer to write the story. I'm kidding. I'm just trying to build up a little USC hatred here. It's palpable everywhere I go. But I found out then that it was that I didn't really know much, and in retrospect, I didn't know anything. But that guy gave me a chance, and the more I thought about that, and I still think about that, a lot of people along the way have given me a chance. The swim coach at USC, when I walked onto the deck and I said, hey, I want to swim for you, and next to me was an Olympic gold medalist, an Olympic record holder, and USC is this great swimming school, and he said, okay, practice is at 5:45. And I said, what any right-thinking college student would say, you mean PM, right? And he said, no, it's AM, and if you come to practice and work out, you can be on the team. And I was about to go through, I'm going to be slower than anybody else because I can't use my legs. But then I thought, well, he'll figure that out pretty soon. He's probably a pretty bright guy. and maybe he won't notice. I'll just show up and swim, and it was great. So he gave me this chance. He gave me this chance to fail or to succeed, and it was up to me. And all through my life, people have given me those chances. And I was a sports nut. I was a sports fanatic. I grew up in Indiana. High school basketball was king. College basketball was even kingier, whatever. And I went to SC, and so I get this chance to write for the LA Times. I want to do something in sports. And here's my chance. And about 6 weeks into it, I found that I hated sports. Especially Los Angeles sports. I hate the Dodgers. I really hate the Lakers. That's me speaking again, and the Trailblazers. That gave me a chance to think. What is it that I really liked about sports? Well, I like finding out stuff about myself. I like the greater message in sports was that a lot of people went out of their way to help me, to give me a chance, to give me an opportunity to prove myself. So I tried then, sort of, to steer my life in a way that I would have those opportunities too, to give back what people had given to me, to provide that chance. I mean, that swim coach could have said, next, because everybody wanted to swim for SC then. It was right after the LA Olympics. It was a great outdoor pool. Nobody knew that practice started at 5:45 a.m. But anyway, so, but he didn't. He gave me a chance. The sports editor from the Times gave me a chance. And time again, I've had those chances. And that's where my passion is. I know a lot about basketball, but I know that basketball is not going to be an end for a lot of people, but running camps for the Trailblazers, not teaching the basketball. We actually use a U of O alum to teach the basketball. But we can use basketball or sports as a metaphor, as it was for me. And that's been the great opportunity. That's been what's driving me. I don't know if I'll be around at the Trailblazers in 3 years, 5 years, whatever, but wherever I go next, I know what I want to do in some way.
Thank you very much. Okay, your turn. Who's got a question? Oh, great.
This is for Bill. I'm wondering, how much time would you say you devote just to writing each day, and when you do field work, what do you usually do for it?
Well, I do hike a lot, but not as much as you might think. I spend a couple of months each summer hiking to update my books. I reprint those books every year and update them every single year. I only print enough for 1 year, and then every spring they're fresh. And that's, there are a lot of other hiking books out there, and you just have to be better. And that means a lot of work. So that's in the summer. I'm doing a lot of hiking, but then I've got 10 months of the year to write. And it doesn't take 10 months to write the hiking book, It takes longer to write about it than to do the hike, that's true. But you still have some time to do some creative writing. And so now I do have some time. And when you're self-employed, there's nobody telling you to get up in the morning at all. You don't, your deadline is a year away. So what I've done is to make myself have a deadline is that I book the author's tour before I've written the book. Then, for example, this one here, the Atlas of Oregon Wilderness, I knew they were talking about doing a new wilderness bill, and so I figured, well, I'll have a book about all these new wilderness areas. And so I book 19 slideshows in 12 days in Portland area and Bend. I'm in the middle of this tour right now. Tomorrow I go to Bend and do 7 slideshows about the book. And then in February, Congress votes down the bill by 2 votes. Oh, bastards. Yeah, right. I'm glad to say that DeFazio was on the right side of this. And they came back, though, and passed it, but it was March. I had to get this book, then the boundaries in there, and get it off to the printer. And literally, it was coming off the press as I drove to Portland, stopped at the factory, and went to my first slideshow. But I do that now each year, not usually that close, but it gives me an incentive to get the book done. Because if I've got this author's tour, you better have the books, or you're just foolish. So that makes me wake up in the morning.
Great.
Long answer to that.
Next question.
This is for Chris. How did you end up breaking into the music industry?
Totally by accident. I the company that I'd started before this current one, we designed trivia games that worked on a DVD player. And I realized at that point that at the ripe old age of 30, I'd spent over half my life. I had said earlier that I got bored with video games, but somehow I got roped back in. So, but it was different because it was a totally different medium. It was actually something that we designed that worked on a standard DVD player for the home, and it was a very different kind of thinking. So, but after we had developed and distributed the game, we sold it to Hasbro, and I was like, okay, career change time, because I've spent half my life pretty much doing almost the same thing. And I had a friend who was doing some work for Madonna, and he needed some graphics done. And I said, well, you know, I think every time I have a career change, I say, well, you know, to the person, just sort of exemplify something. But I said, you know, I've got a background in graphics from my video game days, and I can certainly help you out. So I ended up helping him design Madonna's graphics for the Grammys. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty, it was so surreal actually to be me doing it. And I said, well, maybe we should start a business and we should just do this. Because obviously if you have Madonna under your belt as your first client, it looks good on the resume. But I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I still kind of do, but I think that, it goes back to the core, which is I took an opportunity. And even though I didn't necessarily have, I knew nothing about the music business while I was a fan of music, but I did know that I had a certain skill set and an ability to get something done if I decided to do it. And I think that's probably the biggest asset that I have for myself is when I decide I'm going to do it, I do it. Even if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. In that case, you know, we started this company, and randomly someone had heard that we had done the Madonna graphics for the Grammy, and they called us. And the next job we got was working for a band called Korn. And I got a panic phone call from their manager saying, you know, our tour's going out in a week and we don't have a show. And I said, no problem, we can do it. I had no idea what I was doing. And my business partner, who was the guy that kind of knew what he was doing, had left to go on vacation. So I was left to do this completely by myself in my living room with actually a couple of people that went to U of O that also knew nothing about this business but happened to be fairly decent artists, one of whom actually used to be a doorman at Max's Tavern. And I saw him one day in LA, and I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm trying to get a job as a sculptor. I'm like, no one needs statues anymore. So I was like, but I need help because I've got to do all this stuff for Korn, and I have no idea what to do. He's like, okay. I was like, here's a computer, make some stuff. He goes, I break computers, I don't know how to use them. So I said, well, here's a book. So over the course of like 4 days, we totally winged it, and I had to go up to Bakersfield to meet the band with a hard drive full of graphics. I had no idea if they'd even like it or not. And literally, it was the scariest scene I'd ever had in my entire life. Just Bakersfield, like biker gangs, guys that just wanted to kill everybody. And I was just this like nerdy come-over kid going, hey there, I've got your graphics, no problem. You know, and I go on stage, I meet the lead singer of the band, I show him the stuff, I was like, this is great, we'll take it. So, you know, and that, but I, you know, so, and I, it's strange, you know, and even to this day, like, you know, what I've always appreciated about any opportunity that I've ever had, and it goes back to what you were saying, is that someone decided to take a chance. And I think, you know, and that's probably more than anything else, because you'll see in your own life, you know, whenever you're making a decision and you have, you know, and you meet 5 people in your life, one person's always going to stand out, and it's usually not because of their resume. You know, it's because you feel a sense of confidence that if they say they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And that's probably the biggest quality that leads to success for anybody, is that you're an honest person, and that if you say you're going to do something, you do it the best you possibly can. And that's always been my, you know, my mantra. So whenever I've had a turning point opportunity, and I face it down the barrel, I say, okay, I'll do it. You know, and you know, sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, but I think I always hearken it back to, because I was always the worst at like saying hi to a girl. I mean, I still am, but I used to be worse at it. And I realized what I was fearing wasn't women. I was fearing the potential for rejection, you know. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that holds people back, is the thought, well, I'm not qualified to do this, or I don't know anything about it. And frankly, that's not the point. The point is, are you smart enough to figure out how to do it? Because if you figure out how to do it, you're going to do it in a way that's unique enough that makes it, you know, makes you more special. And that's, And, you know, and I think 10 years from now, I could be here and I'll be like, yes, I grow alfalfas in Wyoming, you know, but I've got the biggest farm in Wyoming, and it's amazing, you know, and you know, and that's, I think, my takeaway is, like, you just got to believe in yourself and never feel like there's any limitations, because that's not what employers are looking for. They're looking for people that are bright, that can execute, that come with ideas and come with the ability to actually execute on those ideas. So that's my short answer.
Very good. Next.
I have a horribly rude question that I just hope other people were wondering about, so it's not so rude, and it's for Chris also. I think most of us probably love what you say about don't rush and don't settle for that cubicle job, but you know, we're graduating with loans. Like, are you independently wealthy? Like, how did you find the means to take these chances?
Oh, no, actually, I was literally wretchedly like, I had horrible debts and all kinds of stuff. And that's why I moved home to live with my parents, you know, which can be probably the most demeaning thing as, you know, a just graduated from college guy who's like, yeah, come back to my place, just be quiet, because my parents, you know. You know, and I went right out and got a job. You know, it paid enough of my bills to help pay all the debts that I had. You know, but I lived a very subsistence life until I could figure out what I wanted to do, and I think that is the thing that I find. It's like doubling down when you gamble. Like, you could take a safe bet in roulette and bet on red or black, and you have a 50-50 chance of having it work out, or you can bet the numbers. And I feel like the younger you are, you should at least bet the numbers once, because if you hit, you're going to be really happy with yourself. And if you don't, maybe you can try it one more time. And so I like didn't have a car, you know, my parents cooked for me, and they were super kind to allow me to stay in their home because I'm a slob, you know, but they knew what I was going for. And it just, you know, the business that I started, you know, we started with nothing. It was put it on a credit card debt kind of situation, and if it didn't work, I was going to be even in worse trouble than I had before. But I felt like, okay, what do I have to lose? I'm a 22-year-old that files for bankruptcy. Great, like, take my $3, you know. So that was my only point. Is that, like, you know, there's one chance. Like, you don't have a house and a car and kids and all these other responsibilities. So you can at least try it once. And if it doesn't work, then you can go get another job and still have a very happy and satisfying life. But just don't have the regret of not trying.
And maybe if I could just counter that, one thing I think that because there's such pressure that folks, and I think particularly come out of college, put on yourselves, you get a grace period, and it's like no one will say this to you, but you really do have a grace period. I mean, obviously, for those of you, and I think, I know I walked out of here with a nice mountain of debt, but you know, Chris is right, a lot of my friends all lived very consistently and just made it, but you don't have to walk out the door of the perfect job. No, you don't know what you want to do when you're 30 or 35. Shoot, I'm reconsidering education and doing new things. I mean, the point is it doesn't stop, it doesn't end. There's always progress and you're moving forward. But give yourself a little bit of break. Know that for the first several years out the chute, you have a grace period. People, employers, I'm one of them, expect you to kind of bounce around and try different things out. No one's going to judge you that harshly for it. So. And we also get as employers that the cost of education has really gone up. Debt's a huge burden. So employers are going to get that a lot of folks are really trying to just make their way and figure it out. So just know that and try to, like, not freak out.
Too much, huh?
Too much.
So how many of you employ or hire interns? How many of you take interns? Okay. Oh, self-publishing, get your hand up. You could get some great internships out of this. Yeah. Hasn't worked out in the past?
I have someone who fills in for me when I'm on vacation or does some shipping, but it's just really, really part-time.
Yeah, little. But there are several intern opportunities up at this desk. Who's got a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Pamela. I was just wondering how you started getting experience in, like, the nonprofit field.
I think nonprofits have been a way of life for me from early years as a Girl Guide up in Canada and seeing my parents, or my mother at least, volunteer for nonprofits. And I'm a pretty passionate person, and actually it was all environmental nonprofits that I joined when I was a teenager and younger. It was the Ontario Canoe Association, it was Girl Guides, and just kind of keep going. And I've started 2 nonprofits as well. I started an environmental nonprofit and one for foster care. And it's just been a passion, and volunteering and seeing the good that nonprofits do in this world just really kept me going, and doing that nonprofit organization specialization along with that public policy and management. I mean, it's a mouthful, but it just brought everything together. I've worked for government, I've worked as a consultant, but these are fairly short-term jobs, and all my jobs pretty well have just been nonprofit jobs, and that's where my passion is.
Great. Another question? Okay, so I would like to just ask you all to maybe offer an additional piece of advice for everyone sitting in the audience, something that you, somebody may have shared with you along the way, or something that through your own wisdom of your own careers might want to share with this group. Oh, okay. Short on wisdom.
If I had to offer a piece of advice for someone who wanted to be a writer, the key would be to be the world's greatest expert on your subject. And that sounds impossible, but it's actually not. You just do a lot of research on it, and read everything that's been read about it, that's been written about it, and go out there and do the research. And it's not that hard to become the world's greatest expert on, I'm going to say, the history of oranges. And you say, oh, that's silly. Well, a very popular book just came out on the history of oranges, and it's fascinating. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. A book about the history of salt, and you say, oh, that's tedious. But not at all. You can make it interesting. You have to be the best, though. You have to really read everything there is, and then check out the competition and write a better book.
Any more wisdom up there?
Well, I would say this. I think that, when I was at U of O, I remember actually I was in my freshman dorm, and I got an email address, and I was like, wow, this is neat. What is this? I mean, I actually, there was no World Wide Web when I got here. There was no university email. Like, I got an email address, but I couldn't use it with anybody, And slowly my floor became kind of the nerd floor, because we all found out about AOL, and it was like, yeah, this is crazy. But now there's social networking and finding groups of people with common interests and knowledge around globally is so easy. And ultimately, there's that whole thing, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And frankly, that's true too. And if you find groups of people with common interests or common ideas, it's very easy to get things off the ground, because you have the people power and the mind power. And when I was in college, it was impossible to find people that thought like me, except if they're institutionalized and they didn't have computers. But I think, knowing that this is a world now, it's totally interconnected. And everyone in here, I'm sure, has a MySpace account, a Facebook account, or whatever it is. You can actually accelerate the process of your own growth in whatever career that you want to have by finding other people that share a common interest. And or if it's not that, thinking about the craziest job you could ever really want to have, and maybe find it somewhere in the world, because it doesn't even just have to be here in Oregon. If you really want to, go start up a moped business in Namibia. It's not like anything's stopping you from doing it. You just have to decide you want to and do the research. And I would just say, use the power of the collective consciousness that is totally available to you to follow your path to your dream, because it's easier than ever to do it. And I would say that, as an employer, I can tell you, besides wanting to find people that have, amazing capabilities in whatever they do, the one other key value that anyone ever brings when they come into my life, that is very useful and not often said, is what is your network of people that you bring to the table? What have you done outside the context of your own business? Are you involved in your community? Are you involved, in the world around you? Do you have a collective consciousness that you bring to whatever you do? Because a lot of problem solving comes from, oh, I'll call my friend, he does that. Or, I've met this person in the past and might have an interesting perspective on this. And that's just as important as the work that you do, because if you think in terms of a singularity, like I am here and I'm doing this thing, you'll only grow to a certain level. But every time you build a bridge to another person or another idea, that has a spidering effect. And and your value will grow. And whether it's a value that you bring to another company or the value you bring to the thing that you're doing, don't forget that part. It's not just you doing it, it's you and all the people around you and all the potential people that link to that.
Thanks, Pam.
Just kind of to follow up with what Chris is saying, he just says it in a very different way. What I would say is, what he said before is believe in yourself, have the confidence that you can do it. And then the other thing that he's saying is really develop those people skills. I'm a very reserved person. Chris doesn't seem to be quite as reserved as I am. And that's where I would say that one of my fallbacks is that I didn't spend my younger years developing networks of people. Yes, I have them now, but I just talk to everyone you possibly can. Might be the hardest thing that you can ever do sometimes for some of us, but talk, develop those relationships, and whether it's through social networking or whether it's one-on-one, but really work on those people skills.
Yeah, I got, and one of the things sometimes too, and also, I definitely have seen the change with technology, and I think there's a lot to that. But in addition to that, one thing I might add is, don't, I don't know how to couch this without, don't diminish the mundane to some degree. And, like one of the things in all of our stories is, if you really had the time, we've all done crazy jobs or just what we're seeing as boring jobs, but it's part of the story and flavor for who we are. And when I interview people, it's almost the most interesting part of who they are, is that everyone kind of going through a path or through a journey, you don't know the end of the story till you get to the end of the story. The journey in and of itself is important, but not every opportunity in your life is just going to be like, disco lights and just jazz. Just a lot of times it's just dull and boring, but you need to be in dull and boring and figure it out and figure out who you are in part of that process. So, just appreciate that it's not to say that everyone's been there, but it's part of how you're going to learn in what you need to know. And the other thing that I sometimes think happens is people really, I find anymore, are getting way too distracted by shiny tinsel and not focusing, and kind of that ability sometime in order to become the expert or the best at whatever it is that you have a passion for, is to find through all the chatter to focus and be clear in your thoughts on whatever that one thing is that's of value or important to you. Because again, in your ability to communicate and present who you are, you need to be clear. You need to have people understand that journey or that path or wherever it is that you're wanting to go, or if you're wanting to go with you, they got to understand what it is you're talking about and how you're going to get there, regardless of what it is. But the other thing too, which I think is important, and the one thing for all of us to remember, as hard as it is to get through college and as much debt as we've all put on, and those of us who are working to try to help alleviate that, we are the privileged folks to get to go to college. And to have these experiences and opportunities, obviously make the most of it when you're here, but also have value and respect for all the work that others do as well, because again, all of the work that we're all doing has value, has meaning, has worth. And so don't see opportunities as beneath you because you have a college education. Don't look down on those who don't have one. It could just be they don't have one today. Maybe tomorrow they'll have something. It doesn't even matter if they have a college education. It's really about that creativity, inspiration, who they are, where they're going. All those things really do matter in the long run.
The thing that I always believe is the concept of potential, and I try to embrace the idea that the greatest limitation that anybody faces are the limitations they put on themselves. So I can be literally anything I want to be. I believe that, and you have to believe that in yourself. And it doesn't matter if you don't make it the first time. That limitation, if you try once and fail and decide, well, I can't make it, then you're right, you can't make it, because you've just told yourself you can't make it. But if you believe that you can make it, and maybe going from point A to point B won't get you, the direct path won't get you there, but if you really want to get to point B, going through C, D, and any other alphabetically challenged, sorry to bring in the letters. I didn't think that one through, but to get, if you really want to get to point B, it doesn't matter how you get there. If you have to go all the way around and come in the side way, the back way, the top way, whatever, that's fine. It's the idea of potential. Don't limit yourself. Don't talk yourself out of that dream job or that position that will get you to your dream job, because you just don't know. And you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that you're capable, because you are.
That's really nice. If I can just have the last word. Yeah, I got the mic. I love that. We're the Career Center, and the business that we're in is building confidence. We're not in the business of putting you in an insurance company if that's not where you want to be. And we're not in the business of telling you what you should be based on your major or the skills that you have. What we're in the business of is helping you to discover the assets that you take out into life from the university, both your knowledge-based skills, but certainly the who you are as a person skills. So I really invite you to take advantage of the Career Center while you're here. It's the cheapest counseling you will ever find. And once you get out and you find yourself trying to solve some of these problems on your own, we hear from alumni constantly, I wish I had taken advantage. So I really want to invite you in. And once again, it's not because we have the answers. The answers are inside of you. We're going to help you to realize some of those notions of who you are as a person and what it is that you have to deliver out in the world of work at this point in time. So I really want to make sure that you understand. You have people that are willing to walk with you, especially in times like this, but actually, even if times were good, we'd be really happy to walk with you then too. So I really invite you to come and take advantage of the Career Center. We are there to serve you, and I've got an amazing staff, and I'm top to bottom. I guess I'm the top, but I'm also the biggest. Top to bottom, we come to work every day because we really believe in the product that we get to work with, and that's you. So, Dean, do you have any final comment that you would like to make?
I think we could give a big round of applause to this panel because they were just fantastic. And also I want to thank Deb Cherick and Sean, Barbara Jenksons for putting together just a great event. Thanks.
So Pam gave some really good advice, and that is that you constantly need to be developing your network. We have some snacks back there, we have some drinks back there, and I know we have 6 people from the front that are gonna make their way back there. We can move some of those chairs out of the way. Find these people and have a conversation with them. Practice your networking skills. See what it feels like to walk up to someone that you really have a lot of respect for and say, tell me a little bit more about what you said when you were talking about this. It'll be really good practice for you, and you might want to get a business card or 2 while you're here. Thank you again for coming. And Sean, thank you for having the vision. We really appreciate it.